Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another action figure review, and today we'll be taking a look at the Godzilla Store exclusive Bandai movie monster series Godzilla Jr. Now this character comes from the 1995 film Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, which overall I think is a very solid movie. I really like how it harkens back to the original 1954 film in multiple different ways, whether it be bringing back certain characters or certain other elements that I'll talk about in a little bit. I think the death of Godzilla in this movie is done really well. You know, like the scene has like a great like score to it, which by the way, the soundtrack of this movie is really good. You know, of course, being done by Akira Ifukube, of course, the soundtrack is going to be top notch in this movie. Well, it's top notch. The soundtrack here is really good, and overall, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is a very nice send off to the Heisei Godzilla series. If I had one thing to complain about, I will say that Destoroyah's final form feels a little underwhelming to me. Like, Destoroyah's, like, first form, where he's, like, multiple different, like, crab creatures that, like, eat people, that's cool. I really like that. And I really like how they all, like, just, like, form into, like, bigger forms that, like, you know, there's one form that flies, and then there's another one that's just, like, a bigger version with, like, these, like, pincer things. Like, that's really cool. But, like, the final form Destoroyah, I don't know. Like, the premise of Destoroyah, I think, is really cool. You know, Destoroyah was created from the Oxygen Destroyer, which was the very weapon that killed the original Godzilla back in 1954. That's sick. That is, like, genuinely such a good idea. I absolutely love that. But again, like, Final Form Destoroyah, in the movie, Destoroyah, like, if he's not just standing around, he's just flying. And that's pretty much it. Final Form Destoroyah doesn't really, like, impress me the way, like, let's say, Biollante impresses me, where, like, you can tell a lot went into Biollante. And obviously, a lot goes into, you know, making all of these Godzilla movies, and Destoroyah is no exception. There was a lot that went into Destoroyah. I don't want to make it out that I'm just being like, oh, Destoroyah, like, you know, no effort here. There is effort. When making movies, obviously, there is effort, like, being put into said movies, you know. Whether you like them or not is one thing, but, like, either way, there's always effort, right? And I don't want to disregard that, you know, for this movie. But, like, I don't know, for this being, like, the final movie in the Heisei era that, like, you know, kills off Godzilla, I don't know, I feel like Destoroyah, like, at least the final form could have been, like, a little more. Maybe something more, like, just like a giant, like, just one just massive, like, crab creature, like the smaller forms, but again, and I like Destoroyah. I like the final form Destoroyah, don't get me wrong. Like, I do think Destoroyah is cool as a monster, but in Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, Destoroyah just, I don't know. He doesn't really wow me like other Godzilla monsters, but I digress. I have been rambling on for far too long. Let's just get into this. Like usual, to start, we'll take a look at the tag, and really quick, I just want to say, it's been a minute since we've reviewed a traditional movie monster series figure. I remember last year, like, most of what I reviewed were movie monster series figures, and I've reviewed some Bandai vinyls this year so far, but, like, not, like, traditional, like, movie monster series figures like this that, like, come with tags, but I digress. But anyway, here we have the front here, we have a nice picture of Godzilla Jr. At the bottom here, we have Godzilla Jr., both in Japanese and in English. Godzilla 2026, some legal information. On the back, we have a nice silhouette of Godzilla Jr.'s dorsal plates, or what dorsal plates he has. Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, movie monster series. This says Godzilla Store. Bandai Namco, ages 3 and up. Bandai, Godzilla, legal information. On the inside, we have a little bit of a bio on Godzilla Jr., as well as just pretty much just more legal information. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the tag. Now going back to Godzilla Jr. himself, to start, we'll take a look at the paint, and the painting on this figure, for the most part, looks good. So as you can see, pretty much the entirety of this figure is going to be casted in this dark green coloration, which I think looks nice. Godzilla Jr.'s toenails and fingernails are going to be painted white. He's going to have a little bit of, like, a brighter shade of green for, like, the front of his torso here, which I think looks nice. Going to his eyes here, we can see that they are going to be painted yellow with orange pupils. The teeth here are going to be painted white. And the inside of the mouth here is going to be this glossy brown, which I think is interesting. The dorsal plates here are going to be painted white, but unfortunately the paint just kind of stops here. Which, on the one hand, this is nothing new for Bandai. You know, there have been multiple times when Bandai just didn't paint the tail entirely and just sort of stopped, like, pretty much here. So, like, yes, this is nothing new. But I feel like with the last few, like, Godzilla Bandai vinyls we've gotten, I feel like they've done, like, an okay, like, you know, job at, like, consistently painting the tail all the way. You know, we got the movie monster series Godzilla 1989, and the tail was painted all the way. We got the movie monster series Godzilla 1994, the tail was painted all the way. GMK Godzilla, the tail was painted all the way. Even the movie monster series Godzilla 1991, that figure had paint all the way to the end of the tail. So, for me, like, going from that and then going to this, it's a little annoying. It's not a deal breaker. Like, overall, like, I will say, like, the rest of the painting here still looks good, but I don't know, it's just a little distracting going from, you know, a fully painted tail to just back to this. I don't really get it, but I digress. But like I just said, the painting on this figure is still good. So, overall, I'd say the painting on this figure gets 3/4 of a pass. Again, I know, no paint on the tail. This is probably not a big deal, but again, for me, it's just frustrating that, you know, the past few Godzilla Bandai vinyls we've gotten, there was, like, paint all the way to the end, and then with this figure, just, nothing. That's a little annoying, but overall, the painting is still good, so painting on this figure gets 3/4 of a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the articulation, and the articulation on this figure, the arms can move inwards like so, and they can move outwards like so. The legs can kick forward about this far, and backwards about that far, and obviously that goes for the other leg as well. And that's pretty much it for the articulation. Not a lot whatsoever, but are you surprised? This is a Bandai vinyl. Look at me with a straight face and tell me that you are surprised that this figure only has 4 points of articulation. Still though, it's a Bandai vinyl, so it's fine. I'd say it gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the sculpt, and the sculpting on this figure I think looks really good. Again, Bandai usually does a good job when it comes to the sculpting on their figures, and this figure is no exception. Proportion-wise, I think this figure looks good. Nothing's too big or too small or too out of place. I think this figure does a really nice job representing Godzilla Jr. from Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. And overall, I do think the sculpting here is really nice. Though one thing I want to point out, and this isn't like, this has nothing to do with the figure. This more so just has something to do with just Junior's design as a whole. But one thing I find interesting, I never knew this until now, the way, like, his, like, legs are designed, they're designed more like traditional, like, theropod dinosaurs, which I think is really cool, and compare that to, like, the traditional, like, leg structure of, like, you know, Godzilla, you know, which makes sense because, you know, in the Heisei era, you know, Godzilla was, like, a dinosaur called, you know, Godzillasaurus. Original name. Oh, that would be a really cool movie monster series figure. I'd actually love to see that. But yeah, this does make sense. But still, it is just really cool to see on Godzilla Jr. So overall, sculpting on this figure is really good. Definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the detailing. And the detailing on this figure, I think, looks really good. So let's take a closer look. So starting off at the head here, we can see all of the scales and all of the ridges here are detailed very nicely. Everything here just pops really well. And overall, like, the detailing on the face here just looks really good. Throughout the body, we do get the traditional scaling that we see on, like, pretty much every Godzilla design. And the scaling here, I think, looks really nice. You know, everything here is just very nicely defined. And, you know, everything just pops really well here. You know, we do have some, like, folds in the skin here, like, on, like, the, you know, back half of the figure here. And on the legs here, we do have a little bit of musculature. And even some nice detailing on the arms here. For the front of the figure here, we have some really nice scaling here. Again, all, like, the wrinkles and everything else just looks really nice. And then once we get to the bottom half of this figure, we just get more wrinkles and folds in the skin. as well as just the tail itself, which just has like, creases and seams and whatnot. And all of the unpainted dorsal plates here are going to be detailed pretty nicely. And same with these, painted dorsal plates. I'm just now noticing that these 6 dorsal plates here aren't fully painted the way all the other dorsal plates are painted. Like, it looks a little off, but not the end of the world. I'm just now noticing it, so, like, again, like, who cares, really? The bigger dorsal plates here are going to be detailed very nicely. All of, like, the ridges there in the center and everything just looks really nice. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the detailing on this figure. Overall, the detailing on this figure, I think, is very good. So the detailing on this figure, I'd say definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll do some size comparisons, and to start right off the bat, here we have the Bandai Movie Monster Series Burning Godzilla version 2.0. And first of all, I just want to say, the scaling between these two is not accurate whatsoever. Godzilla Jr. is much shorter than Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Destroya, so as far as being film accurate, this doesn't work. But in my humble opinion, I actually kind of prefer the scaling. Because just for a second, I want to talk about Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. In Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, there is Little Godzilla, which, as the name implies, is a little Godzilla. Now, it is explained in Godzilla vs. Destroya that Little Godzilla was exposed to an excessive amount of radiation, which mutates him into Godzilla Jr., which I think is a cool idea, and it also harkens back to Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, where, Godzillasaurus was exposed to radiation and turned into Godzilla. So, I do think it correlates with, like, the earlier, like, Heisei, like, series. I like the continuity in, like, the Heisei era of Godzilla. That's what I'm trying to say here. But there is that continuity, and again, I think that's a really cool idea. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me is, despite being exposed to radiation, Godzilla Jr. stayed the same size as he was when he was Little Godzilla, which makes no sense to me. Like, the skeletal structure of both Little Godzilla and Godzilla Jr. are, like, completely different. There should be, like, some growth as far as, like, height-wise. So the fact that they're pretty much the same size and, like, this chubby, like, blob of scales going to this more, like, lean, slender, like, Godzilla-looking creature while still, like, being the same size makes no sense to me. So the height increase here is actually really nice to see. I do actually prefer this scaling than how it is in the movie, but I digress. But anyway, here these two are. Here we have the Bandai Movie Monster Series Giga Destroya. Just moving the wings up like so. There they are. Here we have this little Godzilla -1 Bandai vinyl that I got from the Godzilla store. This has no real significance to the video. I just had it around and I just decided to pull it out. And of course, here we have some hand sanitizer. And here we have Dr. Billy Grant. So at the end of the day, should you get this figure? I'd say yes. I think this is a nice figure. The painting, while it's annoying that the tail isn't fully painted, the rest of the painting here I still think looks really solid. The sculpting is great. The detailing is great. Not a lot of articulation, but, this is a Bandai vinyl. What else do you expect? And overall, this is just a really nice figure, and I do recommend that you pick this one up. As far as price tags go, now, I got this figure from the Japanese Godzilla store, and before shipping, I paid a little over $20, which I think is a fair price. Yeah, that's fair. Then there's, import fees. Now, I bought this figure from the Japanese Godzilla store, so of course I had to import this figure. And just like with Biollante, I decided to use from Japan. And instead of going with UPS, I went with FedEx, and that was the right call. Because with FedEx, you don't need to pay any additional, like, custom fees or anything like that. I believe this figure came in sooner than Biollante did. And overall, FedEx just worked much better for me. There are other shipping options from Japan's website. I know there's DHL. I believe there's ECMS. I could be wrong. There are other options. So if you want to experiment with those, then by all means go for it. But from my experience, I prefer using FedEx over UPS. So there you go. Anyway, that is it for today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace, Zack out.